Have you too felt the pressure this week? You know, the kind that shows up about this same time every year. To me, the pressure feels like a nudge that just kind of sits in the back of my head, but always on alert. And then it sort of raises itself up. It raises a hand every time I see another article looking back on or ranking the best of the past year. Whenever I stumble into some social media post exclaiming, "What a year!" and then showing me in pictures just the very best looking parts of it. The pressure gives me a little push when somebody I really admire, say a religious writer or a public figure, talks about their goal setting and their intention setting for 2026. The pressure is this impulse that says, oh, you should be doing that too. I mean, you probably need to do that. Because you could, so you should. There is this part of me that really wants to sum up a whole year in one lesson learned. And then after I check that box, to start fresh again with some great expectation. That idea is really seductive to me. The pressure is why I love-hate preaching the first Sunday in January. Because I love-hate the pressure itself. On the one hand, I'm drawn to it. And on the other hand, I am pretty sure none of us should buy in. This is not for us. I like reflection. I'm prone to set goals. I want everything in my life to be intentional. I find all that to be spiritual practice. It is absolutely part of my faith to stop and remember and then begin again. But also, I really think we take this reflect on a year stuff too far. I think we let outside ideas run us instead of running our own race at whatever pace we're on. Being thoughtful and reflective is good. Folding ourselves into some cookie cutter version of what that must look like is not so good. And buying into the idea that our best, most curated lives make them more valuable, well, that's no good at all. That's no good for anybody. The pressure I feel every year is the expectation that I need to be able to summarize and kind of maximize my own ordinary, complicated life. And if I can't just name the things, like what are 3 things I see? What can I share that I achieved? What have I learned over this finite 12-month period? Well, if I can't do that, then maybe my last year was less meaningful. This is why, though I really do love your posts, and I'm not judging y'all, love to see your pictures, I can never seem to document a whole year in pictures. I start to do that exercise, pull up the phone, start to scroll, and I just get lost in my own head. I can feel myself get stuck in my own head, rethinking these memories and wondering, was it really that? Or is this just the surface level I captured? I can feel the very moment that the rethinking turns unhealthy. And I believe any of us can fall into the same trap. Most of us can pretty easily be led into overthinking our own lives. And then feeling incomplete when what we see there doesn't measure up to some external mark. Never mind that what's inside us has always been our best guide. I actually think a lot of New Year's talk and habits are just setups for human beings, just setups to make us do more and buy more in this never-ending pursuit of being better. We'll never get there because there's no financial interest in us getting there. I do think we can live better lives, but trying to think our way into better can become a real trap, especially if the thinking about our lives causes us not to fully live them. What our actual lives need is for us to embody them, to live them fully, not in our heads, but out in the wild, out where the pictures are never curated and the background is more often than not a mess, where people are trouble and priorities and values clash, where decisions are changeable and faith is made most real through action. Now, here's where my personal beef with New Year's and all of its messaging becomes a Jesus message. The two just dovetail right in this one beautifully articulated sentence from the gospel writer John, who said, and the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. That's about the oldest way you've heard the line translated. It comes from the King James, because that's the only English version to use the word dwell. Other English Bibles say the Word became a human being and made his home with us, or the Word became flesh and lived among us. All of which I have come to hear as both a caution and an encouragement. The faith that we're a part of is meant to be practiced, lived out as a way of the hands and the heart first. It was never supposed to begin or get stuck in a contest inside our minds about which rules we follow and who else follows them too. Yeah, our minds are involved because our thinking will make the living wholehearted. But the way that modern Western faith has become a series of beliefs instead of practices seems to miss Jesus almost entirely. Because God was a real, actual person as well as the Word of God. He shows us what to do with our real, actual human lives any time in any year. Jesus didn't maximize his gains or returns. But he did say that the way he lived held life and life most abundantly. That in fact, that's why he showed up, to show us abundant life. We heard the very beginning of John's gospel a couple of times in December, back during the Advent season. So today, I still want to be in the first chapter of John, but to start a few verses in and read the full passage that dwell with us phrase comes from. This is John 1, 14 through 18 in the NRSV Bible. And the Word became flesh and lived among us. And we have seen his glory, the glory of a Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Now John testified to him and cried out, "This is he of whom I speak, of whom I said, he who comes after me ranks ahead of me because he was before me." From his fullness, we have all received grace upon grace. The law, indeed, was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God. It is only the Son who is close to the Father's heart who has made God known. It's a great passage, I think, and pretty self-explanatory. I just want to go on record as saying you don't actually need a preacher to interpret that for you today. That already makes sense however you heard it. Jesus is the form of God we human beings have seen and observed and have known, when God is otherwise unseen and honestly kind of hard to know. Definitely harder. Jesus brings all people closer to something cosmically bigger than ourselves. And that something or other seems to want good for us. Maybe only good for us. Because the human expression of that big mysterious thing enters human space to bring us grace upon grace. What that means, grace upon grace, is unmerited favor, love, and kindness, piled up and overflowing, enough for everybody. So already that's pretty great. But as I am a preacher, I tend to want to add context and look at specific words in any given passage. Know today that is simply to make it mean more and not to say it doesn't already mean what you hear. John's gospel is the one that starts the earliest. John chapter 1 is really just another nativity story. It's another arrival story like the ones we read in December, just from a different perspective. Mark, which is probably the first gospel written, he starts the account of Jesus' life at his adult baptism. Just skips all that baby stuff entirely. Matthew pushes back the start of the story a bit earlier, before Jesus' birth, but immediately so, when Joseph receives an announcement that his betrothed is pregnant. Later, Matthew's gospel also traces Jesus' family all the way back to Abraham. And then comes Luke, the next gospel written going further back still. Luke begins with an announcement to Mary that she will conceive. It starts the story before Jesus as we know. And Luke's genealogy of Jesus' family goes all the way back to Adam, the very first person. Then John trumps everybody by starting with creation. Because that's what it means when John says, in the beginning was the Word. It's a very powerful nod to the creation of all things. That's John just reminding us that this Jesus I'm about to tell you about, this Jesus I'm about to document, well, he is cosmic as well as finite. He is, as John says, the Word as well as flesh. And when John writes about Jesus as the Word, in Greek, it's logos, he doesn't mean a literal word. He is not talking about a part of spoken or written language, because there were other ways to say that in Greek. There were other words for word in Greek, like as in nouns that name things. If that's what John meant, he would have said vocabulum. Jesus isn't just grammar for God. Jesus is God, fully. John is calling Jesus the very reason of God, the logic of God, the doctrine and account of God. That's more what logos means. Jesus is the wisdom and encapsulation or design of God in motion. This really cool point is made best in other languages sometimes if we just bust out of English. There's a Spanish Bible that translates John 1:1 like this. In el principio ya existía el verbo. In the beginning was the verbo, the verb, not the word. I think that's so cool. That as other people see it, Jesus wasn't just one thing. Jesus was the action of God. Logos means the embodiment of a whole big concept to the very fullest and highest form. God who is and was, and also, strangely, materially us. Because flesh is this other great word in the passage, and flesh in Greek is sarx. It says more than, and he was human. Sarx is like this beautiful, gritty, humble word, just the way flesh sounds to you. Like that's a little bit humble and gritty. Like more ordinary than self or body is flesh. Sarx doesn't mean a body as some beautiful combination of related parts, because there is another Greek word for that. It's not a scientific word like organism or a philosophical word like being. It is skin and tissue, frail but beating lungs, bones that can break. Sarx is the material or substance of human form. And that's the thing the divine has become, says John, fully human in the middle of human experience. When the team writing a Bible for King James translated part of verse 14 as dwell among us, well, they really weren't wrong. I'm going to hand it to them. They came very close to the original word, which meant to encamp or set up a tabernacle, to occupy or to reside. Quite literally, the design who is flesh pitched a tent among us. The verb who is God pitched his tent and moved in next to us. I wondered again this week, what does that even mean? Sounds great, but what does it mean, and what does it mean to me? Yeah. Well, I think it means that this room of people and this worship service, both of whom I love, are just practice. We are almost and mostly, but not quite, all the things. Sometimes we learn here, sometimes we're reinforced here. Always, I think we're encouraged here. But what we're called to do isn't this thing. It's to practice out there. It's to live out our real, actual faith in the world. where Jesus pitched the tent to move into the neighborhood and get to know the neighbors. Here's how the Message Bible says all the same things. These are the same verses, John 1, 14 through 18. And I'll remind myself and y'all that the Message is a paraphrase. So it does go back to the original Greek words, but then it thinks about more than what they literally mean. And it thinks, what in conversation was the speaker trying to say? It tries to use the original words in the way they were delivered originally. The Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. We saw the glory with our own eyes, the one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous inside and out, true from start to finish. John pointed him out. John called, "This is the one I told you was coming after me, but in fact was ahead of me. He has always been ahead of me. He has always had the first word." We all live off of his generous abundance, gift after gift after gift. We got the basics from Moses. And then this exuberant giving and receiving, this endless knowing and understanding, all that came through Jesus, the Messiah. No one has ever seen God, not so much as a glimpse. This one-of-a-kind God expression, who exists at the very heart of the Father, has made God plain as day. So what do I think God makes plain? What do I think Jesus expresses plain as day? That the most humble sarx is home to the divine. That all the actual lived lives matter. The religion built around Jesus was never supposed to be a way to step beyond a very messy reality. It was not ever a call to circle the wagons and protect the children. It's not permission to interact only with safe people. It's not an okay to amass wealth without moving it around, seeing needs, and working to meet them. It has never been about curating or collecting only the best memories. Following Jesus is not about sidestepping anything real that happens to anyone on this earth. Jesus is not a way to think ourselves beyond reality, but a way to navigate reality while we're still figuring it out, while we're living it. As we struggle to reconcile our love of country with our love of humankind, for example, as we struggle to know what is ours to do in the world, that's not supposed to be simple and straightforward, by the way. It's hard on purpose. Most of life is this lived dance of shifting values and allegiances, of both and truths, of changing because we're growing. The Jesus way is a constant recalibration to see God in people and then act accordingly. To love with our hearts and souls, minds, and strength every messy, imperfect day. Our faith in Jesus has to become a verbo for us to really live it, for us to live any new year to its abundant fullest. And really, that's all we have, is the living to hold us together. Agreement over terms or a common enemy to fight doesn't really fill us up, won't really do it. That will leave us incomplete, absolutely. But what can make our lives most abundant is imagining the world as one big neighborhood where there are always new people to encounter, grace to give, and grace to receive. I think that is a resolution I can choose to live by. That the world is God's neighborhood, and in this new year, I will look more for graces to give and graces to receive. I hope that that is a reflection and a resolution we can all believe in. I'd like to end with some words from Kate Bowler, who you can find online. She's worth following. She's a Duke professor, a writer, a theologian, and a cultural myth buster, as she calls herself. Just like me, Kate has got really deeply mixed feelings about the messaging around New Year's, any given New Year. She feels that push also to maximize and do more. And she is not afraid to say out loud, this is the way into discontent. Here is the better part of a blessing and curse that Kate Bowler wrote for 2026. Blessed are we who strive earnestly to change ourselves and the world around us, but still feel the drag and the pull of things that won't budge. The weight of all our limited and frail humanity. We carry it with us. Blessed are we, the hungry, the incomplete, in lives that are both too much and not enough. Blessed are we who see life as it really is, painful, gorgeous, stingy, wonderful. May we expand, may we contract. Her blessing goes on, but I stopped there just to say, may we all breathe in and breathe out more and more grace for the lives we actually live every single day. Amen.